So almost out of the blue, at the beginning of our Parashah Lech Lecha, God appears to Abraham, commands him to travel to the promised land, blesses him, and promises him that he will become a great nation. Well, last week in the Parsha, we were told explicitly why Noah was chosen at pretty much the very moment that we introduced to him, because God found him righteous in that generation. Not so with Abraham. In fact, we meet Abraham at the age of 75. And while we have a pretty comprehensive backstory of his life described in the Midrashim about how he discovered through his own efforts the one God, how he destroyed his father's idols, how he stood up for his newfound faith, all of that is Midrash. And the Torah text chooses to omit all of that. So instead, we have to look for clues in the Torah narrative itself as to why Abraham was chosen. Well, the first and simplest answer is that Abraham answered the call. God said, Lech lecha, get up and go. So Abraham got up and went. Is this perhaps the embodiment of the saying that fortune favors the brave? At any rate, one central characteristic of Abraham that we see from this episode is that he is undoubtedly very brave. And then, of course, there's the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. Abraham was prepared unquestioningly to obey the command of God, even though it was completely counterintuitive. And for that, one needs immense faith. He's also completely honest in his business dealings. We see that in the episode describing the purchase of a burial place for his wife Sarah in next week's parasha. And when Sarah asks Abraham to expel Hagar and his son Ishmael, he obeys her. So he's a man who listens to his wife. And that at least has to be a good reason for being chosen. He feeds strangers, so hospitality and kindness are hallmarks of his personality. And of course, at the age of 99, he circumcises himself, clearly not a very easy thing to do, another example of his obedience. And of course, an excellent contender for the prize of chosenness is that Abraham is prepared to argue with God, to question his actions on behalf of his fellow human beings, as we see in the bargaining with God to save the population of Sodom and Gomorrah. So in summary then, Abraham is faithful, he's brave, he's obedient, he's bold, he's honest, and he's kind. And that's an excellent CV. But none of these qualities are unique amongst the patriarchs, the matriarchs, or the other biblical personalities. So we have to look further. And the true answer as to why Abraham was chosen is actually staring at us in the face in an explicit verse in Genesis chapter 18, verse number 19. And it reads as follows: For I've chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. It's all very well to choose a wonderful and exceptional person with whom to begin the Jewish line. But if that person makes no effort to pass on his beliefs and values to his progeny, the project is going to be over before it's even had a chance to get started. And so it seems that the key quality that God is looking for is the transmission of values to the next generation. And that was Abraham's special quality and the reason why he was chosen. Well, of course, the outcomes of our attempts to transmit values and beliefs to the next generation are not always guaranteed. Isaac follows his father's path, Ishmael doesn't. Likewise, Jacob and Esau, and indeed, throughout the generations. Pious parents don't necessarily produce equally pious children. But the duty of a parent to try their very best is that singular quality that God appears to value, because without that quality, there would be no Jewish people today. Well, these days, the outcomes of our efforts are actually much more difficult to predict. In the prevailing ethos of a liberal democracy, we put enormous effort into educating our children to be independent human beings. And therefore, it should be no surprise if they make life choices that are different to our own. Haredi communities have greater success in the transmission stakes because they place faith and obedience above independence of choice. And that, and of course their birth rate, is the reason why they are the fastest growing part of the Jewish community. So the question is this: does that leave any hope for the future of centrist Orthodox communities such as ours, in which strict religious observance is not its defining feature? And that's a hard question to answer. Jonathan Sachs asked the question, will we have Jewish grandchildren? So I want to suggest that while faith and obedience may be key factors for lasting transmission, there are all the other Abrahamic qualities as well: strong Jewish identity, kindness, caring, honesty, hospitality, and standing up for what is right and just. And the fact that so many young Jewish people today, including children of our community, possess these qualities is testament to the fact that the singular factor for which Abraham was chosen continues to be effective amongst his descendants 3,000 years on, and even in non-Haredi communities. Shabbat Shalom.